do a quick recap of our March 19th Des Moines real estate investing meetup. So we did a virtual call via Uber conference for the first time ever. I told everyone that I was going to record it, and I thought I did, but I clearly did not. So next best thing, we're going to try to do a recap of that. Unfortunately, Larry couldn't join me again for this recap, but I want to introduce him and also give credit where credit is due. So Larry answered a ton of questions for us, gave a ton of background. So Larry Wolf is the vice president of Hardin County Savings Bank. He's up in Eldora, Iowa. So Larry grew up kind of in that ag business. He was an appraisal for several years. And then on top of that, he's been a banker for about 30. So he's been around the block. You know, he's seen the different market cycles come and go, been through thick and thin. So we really picked his brain. And I want you guys to keep in mind, this is my interpretation of what he said and provided in that group. If you were there, I beg you, I tried to compile as many notes and comments from folks as I could in this recap, but I really want you to comment on this video. If I miss something or if I misspeak somewhere, feel free to call me out, guys. That's what this is about. It's all about community. We're trying to grow it together, right? It's not anything more than that. So we picked Larry's brain and he provided us with a ton of insights. So just jumping right into it, we talked right out of the gate about the Fed rate and what it means. And the Fed rate is kind of that interest rate that everyone thinks lending is based off of, right? And that's true. But there's really two pieces to that Fed rate. There is the piece wherein the bank borrows money from the Feds or a banker's bank. A little tidbit of information there. It doesn't always come directly from the Feds. In a lot of cases, banks are borrowing from banker's bank, and that banker's bank is marking up money as well. So that can be in the form of short-term, long-term, or mid-term rates. And those rates can be locked or variable, just like we get as consumers and investors, right? So banks, your local banks, probably borrow some amount of their capital from a banker's bank. Other than that, they also have some money on file with their bank, and that they have to keep those ratios in check. I don't know what those ratios are. I'm not a banker, but for the most part, you get the idea. The other piece, there's two pieces of that Fed rate, is the rate that banks can earn from the Feds. Now, that was news to me. I didn't realize that was the case, but there's really two rates, the rates that they can borrow from them and also the rates that they can lend to them. So why would a bank ever want to lend money to the Feds? Well, overnight dollars and cents, sometimes a bank needs or has a bunch of deposits that they don't have lent out. So it's better to earn a few dollars and cents than it is to earn nothing, right? So they might deposit those monies with the Fed overnight, bring them back the next day for operating. Make a little bit of an arbitrage. So what's it mean when the Fed cuts rates down? Well, it means two things. One, it means that hopefully we can borrow at a lower rate as consumers and as investors. But that's not always the case because you've got that little guy in the middle called that banker's bank. And again, the bank that you're working with might have locked interest rates with them for a certain amount of money within that bank. It also means that when they lower that rate, the bank can't earn as much money for their deposits when they put it back with the Feds. It's kind of interesting, right? So Larry gave us this great example. He talked about the Fed rate as the water to a dry sponge, right? So right now the Fed's lowered rates to try to inject lending into our economy. The problem is we have this weird crisis hanging out there. That's kind of like the heat lamp, right? So it's sapping all of that water out of it. So you've got these competing pieces. So the Fed's lower rates, crisis is kicking up, kind of drying that sponge back out. And we're getting this give and this take. So we don't know where this is going yet, but it's definitely causing some interesting scenarios and putting a lot of anxiety into the market. The big piece that we don't know is where's this concern going to go? You know, this isn't like any of the previous crashes that we've seen in recent history. So back in the 80s, there was that farm crash. That farm crash really came from speculation based off profits from land, from ag land, right? And that drove ag land way up. And then the Feds came in and said, hey guys, we're going to jack interest rates up really high to kind of slow this down. And when they did that, we spiraled out of control. And that was the farm crash of the 80s. Similarly, back in 07, 08, right, we had not an interest rate issue. Interest rates were pretty solid then, but what we had was a saturation of inventory. So Larry used this awesome example. He called it musical chairs, but for real estate, right? So what happened was we had all of this inventory developed that was sitting out there available. And then all of a sudden we realized we have a lot of loans out there that aren't great. And some of those valuations that we did weren't the best. I mean, we were lending huge amounts, like over 100% in some cases, right? So that kind of stopped. Then we tightened lending standards again. And then we realized not everyone needs more than one house. So we got stuck with all this extra inventory. So like he said, is when the music stopped, we had more houses than people. And we, on top of that, we had a lot of adjustable rates, and we had a lot of poor valuation practices and poor lending standards. Contrast that to now, where we're not really seeing either one of those factors. We're not seeing an overinflation of market. Really, if you look at active listings, at least in our market, active to pending, they're holding pretty steady. There's not a surplus of inventory necessarily. So that's kind of interesting. But instead what we have is this massive COVID thing going on, where everyone is kind of being told to stay at home. We don't really know what's going to happen with the market. We don't know how big of an issue this is going to be. So we don't know what's going to happen, but we can speculate a little bit. Now, before we speculate too much, I really want to preface it with, we don't have the answers, guys. We're not crystal balls. We have no idea, but hopefully, right, we will all get through this together one way or another. In the way that we're going to do that best is taking a pause and revisiting kind of the foundational investing principle, right? So looking at what makes up a good investment. There's a handful of pieces here: leverage, ARV calculations, making sure your numbers are right, making sure your repair numbers are right, making sure your hold ratios are looking correct. The problem that we're seeing right now in trying to value things is we're missing some of those inputs. What was true a week ago isn't necessarily true today, or at least we don't know if it's true. We don't know how long we're going to have to hold those properties. We don't know how long, if we're going to be able to get supplies to fix them up. And we don't know what the value inevitably will be when we go to resell it. So what do? A lot of investors are saying, I think we need to hold on a little bit. But where we're really seeing a big uptick, even presently, is with rental changeover. So part of that's driven because of the time of year, right? So we're coming at the end of March. We start to see a lot of leases set for April, May, June. So people are out there looking for rental properties. So a lot of folks are asking, what do we do? How do we protect ourselves? Well, pause. Think about the investing principles again, right? How do we manage our cash flow? How do we make sure that we're being good stewards of our investments? If you hold rental properties, now would be a good time to revisit rental applications, the standards that are getting approvals, and maybe consider laxing up on those just slightly, or at least analyzing it, right? And if you don't have rental standards, definitely take a look at making some rental standards. Be proactive about filling your units up. So what I mean by that is if you can lease it up for $50 less today over a year, that's not a ton of money. That's probably less than sitting on a vacant unit for a month or 2 months or 3 months. So definitely be proactive about trying to fill them up. And for your existing units, consider early pay incentives, right? So maybe that's not giving away dollars and cents. Maybe that's, hey guys, if you pay on time this month, I know we're all in this together. It's very tough, right? If you guys pay on time this month, I'll lower rent by $25 just this month. Or hey, you've got a couple bucks in accrued late fees for one reason or another. Maybe if you pay on time, we could waive those. Just make sure whatever you do, you apply globally. Look at your rental standards, get them wrote down. Look at your early pay incentives, get them wrote down. Make sure that you're doing it in a uniform fashion. I don't want to see folks coming in and making discriminatory practices or discriminatory claims, right? We definitely want to make sure that we're applying things universally. So the other question that we're getting throughout this call is what are the banks going to be doing here? Is money going to dry up? Can we still borrow? Can we still lend? That's a great question. So Larry told us, in his opinion, there's three types of investors. You've got your cash heavy investors that can take on the risks independently. And those guys, whatever they do is up to them. They don't have anyone looking over their shoulder or requiring anything. Then you've got the investor who can't afford to do anything without some form of lender, right? They might be leveraged to the teeth right now, or they might not be. It all depends on what their practices look like, but they probably need some kind of lending partner. And then you've got that investor who has nothing to lose but everything to gain. So probably doesn't have a lot of skin in the game right now. Maybe doesn't have any assets in the market, so they can take riskier investments because there's nothing to lose there, right? So that's Larry's opinion. Is there's three different categories of investors. So where he's looking, and where most bankers prudently would be looking, right, is to partner with those cash heavy guys. So people who can take on a larger percentage of those risks. Or, the other piece is who have a relationship built with them. And that's really important. A lot of people overlook the value of relationships, especially when things are rolling, right? When things are going so good, oh yeah, we'll shop for the best rates. But what we forget is relationships matter more when things get tough. So, for example, in the midst of a crisis like we're seeing right now, now's the time that relationships really matter. Having that second set of eyes to run something against, or having that partner that you've worked with for years that can say, hey guy, yeah, I definitely want to work with you. I'm a little concerned about the market, but we've worked together for a long time. I know you know what you're doing, so let's take a chance on this. Those relationships are critical, like super critical. Think about this in a negative sense for a second. If you're working with a national lender where you're just a number on their balance sheet, right? You've got a loan with them, cool, that's great. Your interest rates may be lower, you're fully amortized out over 30 years, you're leveraged at 85% loan to value, something to that effect. What happens in a time of crisis? Well, you try to call them, right? You give them a call and you sit on the hold line for an hour and a half. And you're like, hey, I don't know if my tenants are going to be paying this month, so I might not be able to pay you. They have a very routine procedure on how to handle this. They're going to apply it uniformly across the board. And what that answer is, we don't know what that answer is right now, but foundational investing practices say if you're at 85% and fully amortized, there's not a whole lot that they're going to be able to do, maybe a forbearance, right? Whereas conversely, if you're working with a local lender who knows your name, who knows your business model, who looks at you as a person, there's an opportunity there to take a leap of faith in some respects, or hopefully that relationship was mutual, and over the years you have ingrained in each other kind of your wherewithal, right? And from a banker's perspective, right, they want to see those loan to values get lower. They want to see those amortizations get lower if they're doing you a service. So what I mean by that is, me personally, I don't invest at 85% amortizations. I never have and I never will. And I also don't use 30-year fixed money. Now, a lot of people are like, why? Cash flow. Yeah, I get that. But it's for these downturns like this. It's also for a peace of mind, right? So at the end of the day, if I have a 15-year amortization and I have a 65% loan to value, I'm probably not going to be able to scale as fast, but that might not be a bad thing. But what I've done is I've hedged my bets, right? I've hedged my downturn. For example, if my tenants don't pay this month, it'll hurt. We have the reserves in place though, and it'll be okay. If they don't pay next month, it'll hurt a little bit. Again, we have the reserves. If it goes on for a third month, I need to say, ooh, what do I do? I call Larry on his cell phone and I say, Larry, we're 3 months into this. I don't know what's going on. He has the opportunity, because he knows me, because we've built that relationship, to look at our global portfolio, to look at our wherewithal and say, hey, you're on a 15-year amortization right now. Rather than doing anything, let's just remodify that. We'll pull that out to a 25-year or a 30-year from now, because we have that room. We haven't gone into the equation with a 30-year maxed out loan. Likewise, because we've been paying down on those loans at a rapid rate, we have built equity inside of those properties at a faster rate. So market came down 15%. We started at 65, but we've been paying on those loans for a while now. So hopefully, hopefully there's more equity in there. And now if we need to pull dollars and cents out, there's a baseline for that. We're not at 0% equity because the markets came down 15%. We're not at a great equity rate, but we have room to restructure it. So really what I'm trying to say is relationships in this time and as we move forward are the key to investing, and also really being humble enough to acknowledge that we don't have all the answers. So we need to look at other people around us for those answers in some cases. And who's better to do that in a relationship than your lender? If you can't convince your lenders that it's a good project, you really need to take a second look at that project as a whole. So I know I didn't cover everything that we talked about in that phone call. I covered the things that were imperative on my mind, and also that we had comments on and really came up a handful of times. In addition to this quick 15-20 minute video, we are going to post as many notes as we could. So Jess was kind enough to type up as many notes as we could find and comments from other people, and we sent out to a handful of you to review before we posted it. So Jess is going to post that as well in conjunction with this. I want to remind you guys, if I missed something that you felt was critical, please put it in the comments. Record your own video, link it to this. This is a meetup, guys. I know I'm talking a lot, but that's because I'm the only one here to record it right now. But it is really a group effort, and I really want everyone to engage in this. So please, if I miss something, add it to the video, tag it in the comments, do something. If it's super important that I missed, I will re-upload this with your comments and credit them where they're due. So again, guys, thanks for listening in, and I apologize for not hitting the record button on the call. We'll fix it next time. Thanks, and have an awesome day.